Commander Arik Dane stood at the edge of the landing platform, his boots crunching softly against the pale, glassy soil of Zephyra Prime. The twin suns of the planet hung low in the sky, painting the clouds in shades of violet and gold. From here he could see the sprawling city of the Zephyri, tall crystalline towers that shimmered like rainbows in the sunlight. It was beautiful, but it also made him uneasy. He had never dealt with an alien species this sophisticated before. The mission was simple in theory: negotiate a resource-sharing treaty. Humans needed rare minerals that only Zephyra Prime could produce, and the Zephyri wanted advanced human technology to help their growing colonies. But Arik knew diplomacy was rarely simple. One wrong word or gesture could turn the delicate meeting into a confrontation. He adjusted his jacket and glanced at the transport shuttle behind him. It had brought him safely from Earth's orbit to this world, but he could not shake the feeling of strangeness that clung to him here. Everything was different. The air smelled faintly metallic, the ground felt soft beneath his feet, and even the light seemed to hum with quiet energy. A sudden shimmer in the air caught his attention. A figure stepped out from the crystal buildings. Oh, Zephyri. Unlike anything Arik had seen, she was tall and elegant, her skin pale with a subtle iridescent glow. But what drew his eyes immediately was her tail. Long and expressive, it moved with a life of its own. She had it curled tightly behind her, the tip twitching in a way that seemed almost alive. Commander Arik swallowed nervously. "She's watching me," he murmured to himself. The Zephyri approached slowly, every movement graceful. She stopped a few meters away, her large, luminous eyes studying him. Arik noticed her hands were folded lightly, the fingers moving with a rhythm that seemed deliberate and calculated. Her tail, still curled, gave a subtle flick. Was it anger? Curiosity? He could not tell. "Greetings, Commander Dane," she said, her voice melodic but firm. "I am Lyra. You have come far to speak with the Council." Arik inclined his head. "I am honored to meet you, Lyra. I hope we can come to a fair agreement for both our people." Lyra's tail flicked again, sharply this time. Arik's stomach twisted. He had learned that the Zephyri used their tails to express emotions, but he still could not read them. Is that anger? He wondered. He decided to speak carefully. "I assure you our intentions are peaceful," he said, trying to project confidence. Lyra studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. The tail flick was gone, replaced by a rigid stillness. She said nothing further, merely gesturing for him to follow. Arik obeyed, careful not to make any sudden moves. He had heard stories of alien diplomacy gone wrong, and he did not want to become a cautionary tale. The council chambers were a marvel. Massive crystal structures rose from the ground like trees, refracting the light in patterns that shifted as one moved. The Zephyri councilors sat in a semicircle, their tails moving with subtle grace. Arik noticed that the tip of Lyra's tail moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, every time he spoke. It was confusing and unnerving, but he did his best to ignore it. "Commander Dane," one of the councilors said, his voice deep and resonant. "Why should we share our resources with humans?" Arik squared his shoulders. "Because cooperation benefits both our species. Humans bring technology that can improve your settlements, while the minerals from Zephyra Prime can help humanity survive and grow. Together, we can create a future that neither of us could achieve alone." Lyra's tail twitched again, this time with a subtle upward curve. Arik's eyes flicked to it. Was that agreement? Or was it irritation? He decided not to ask. Another counselor leaned forward. "And what guarantees do we have that humans will honor any agreements?" Arik felt a bead of sweat on his temple. "My personal word, and the backing of the Earth Federation. We honor our commitments because trust is the only way forward. I ask you to give us a chance to prove it." There was silence. The counselors whispered among themselves, their tails moving with soft, intricate patterns. Arik tried to read them, but it was impossible. The Zephyri had a language of body and tail that humans could barely comprehend. Finally, Lyra spoke. "Trust is not given lightly, Commander Dane. But actions speak louder than words. You will begin by assisting us with the Storm Barrier project. If your people work alongside ours without conflict, we will consider your proposals. Arik inclined his head respectfully. Understood. I will do everything I can to ensure success. Lyra's tail flicked again. This time it was not sharp or rigid. It curved slightly in a way that seemed almost curious. Arik felt a small spark of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of understanding. The council meeting ended, and Arik was escorted back to his quarters. He could not stop thinking about Lyra. She was unlike any alien he had ever met. Her demeanor was proud and cautious, yet there was something intriguing in the way she moved. Her tail, so expressive and alive, seemed to communicate things he could not understand. That night, Arik walked along the crystal pathways near his quarters. The twin moons reflected off the ground, casting a soft, ethereal light. He wondered how he could ever hope to communicate fully with the Zephyri. Words were limited, but gestures, actions, and trust could speak volumes. He remembered Lyra's subtle tail movements during the meeting. Each flick, each curl seemed to carry meaning. If he could learn to understand them, perhaps he could build a connection not just for the treaty but on a personal level. The next morning, Arik reported to the storm barrier site. It was a massive structure designed to shield the city from frequent electromagnetic storms that swept across the planet. Human technology could enhance it, but Zephyri knowledge of local conditions was essential. Arik was paired with Lyra for the project. When he arrived, Lyra was already there, her tail curled tightly behind her. She did not greet him, only inclined her head slightly. Arik felt a pang of nervousness. She still doesn't like me, he thought. Maybe I misread everything, but he forced himself to speak calmly. Good morning, Lyra. Ready to start? Lyra's tail twitched, almost imperceptibly. It was a small movement, but it made Arik pause. Could it be acknowledgement? Interest? He didn't know, but he decided to take it as a positive sign. They worked side by side, Arik handling human machinery, while Lyra monitored energy flows and environmental data. At first, communication was awkward. Arik had to rely on gestures and simplified language, while Lyra's tail movements added a layer of complexity he was struggling to interpret. Hours passed. Slowly, a rhythm developed. Arik learned to notice the smallest cues. A slight curl of the tail indicated approval, a flick meant caution, and subtle sway showed curiosity. By the end of the day, he could anticipate some of Lyra's movements and adjust his actions accordingly. During a brief break, Arik sat near the edge of the barrier platform, watching the swirling clouds of the storm approaching. Lyra joined him silently, her tail resting gently on the ground. Arik risked a glance at her, and she met his eyes. For the first time, he felt a flicker of warmth as if she were comfortable around him. I didn't mean to startle you earlier, he said softly. I hope we can work well together. Lyra's tail gave a slight upward twitch. Arik's heart raced. It was not a gesture he fully understood, but it was different from the sharp flicks he had seen before. It felt friendly. The twin suns set, casting long shadows across the crystalline towers. Arik realized that today had been a small victory, not just for the project but for their relationship. He had taken the first steps in understanding the Zephyri, and Lyra, in her own way, had responded. As night fell, Arik returned to his quarters with a sense of cautious optimism. Lyra had not hated him. Perhaps she was simply careful, observing, learning. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more. Trust, friendship, or even connection beyond words. For the first time since landing, he felt he had a chance to succeed not just in diplomacy, but in bridging the gap between human and Zephyri hearts. The twin suns of Zephyra Prime were high in the sky, casting their violet-gold glow over the crystalline city. Commander Arik Dane walked briskly toward the storm barrier site, a sense of purpose driving his steps. Today was no ordinary day. Reports from the colony indicated that the electromagnetic storms common on this planet were approaching faster and stronger than ever before. Arik adjusted the strap of his utility pack and glanced at the horizon. Dark clouds churned with eerie green and purple lightning, twisting like liquid fire. The energy readings were off the charts. If the barrier wasn't reinforced quickly, parts of the colony could be damaged, and lives would be at risk. Lyra was already at the site, her tail curled tightly behind her. She turned to acknowledge him, her eyes reflecting the swirling storm clouds. Her tail flicked once, sharp and deliberate, and Arik winced. He wasn't sure what it meant. Was it irritation or focus? "Commander Dane," she said, her voice calm but firm. "The storm is approaching faster than expected. We must begin immediately." Arik nodded. "Understood. Let's get to work." The barrier itself was an impressive piece of technology, a combination of human machinery and Zephyri energy fields. Human engineers had designed the stabilizing units, while the Zephyri added their crystalline conduits to channel energy efficiently. Arik and Lyra had to coordinate the placement of these units, a task that required precision and teamwork. As they began, Arik noticed her tail flick again, this time with a subtle curve. He paused. Could it mean approval? He decided to take it as encouragement and continued carefully. Hours passed. The storm grew closer, the wind howling like a living thing across the open platform. Sparks flew from damaged conduits, and the energy readings surged unpredictably. Arik and Lyra worked side by side, communicating with gestures and simple words. It was slow at first, but they adapted quickly, learning each other's rhythm. "Commander," Lyra said, pointing to a conduit that was sparking dangerously. "Move it now." Arik dove forward, catching the conduit before it could fall. Sparks sizzled around him, but he managed to secure it. Lyra's tail twitched sharply, then curved slightly. Arik frowned. The movements were confusing, but he felt a flicker of satisfaction. Maybe she appreciated his quick reaction. As they worked, the storm drew nearer. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, crackling with raw energy. The first lightning strikes hit the barrier, causing the human machinery to shudder. Arik adjusted the controls while Lyra channeled energy through her crystalline conduits. Together, they stabilized the unit, preventing a potential collapse. For a moment, they paused, breathing heavily. Arik glanced at Lyra. Her tail was no longer stiff. It swayed, gently, almost rhythmically. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. It was as if she were at ease with him. "You are improving in understanding the patterns," she said softly. "You learn quickly." Arik smiled, wiping sweat from his brow. "I'm learning from the best. Your guidance helps." Her tail flicked upward, a movement he had learned to recognize as acknowledgement. He nodded, feeling a small sense of pride. Suddenly, an alarm blared. A secondary storm front was forming, faster and more violent than the first. Arik and Lyra exchanged a glance. There was no time to waste. They needed to reinforce the outer barrier immediately, or parts of the colony would suffer serious damage. "Let's move," Arik shouted over the rising wind. The outer platform was exposed to the full force of the storm. Lightning struck dangerously close, and the wind threatened to knock them off balance. Arik and Lyra moved carefully, each step precise. Lyra's tail swayed in a pattern Arik had come to recognize as caution. He nodded, signaling that he understood. Together they adjusted the outer units, bracing against the wind. A sudden surge of energy knocked one of the units loose. Arik lunged forward, grabbing it just in time. Lyra reached out, stabilizing it with a crystal conduit. Their hands brushed, briefly. Arik felt a jolt, not from electricity but from something deeper, an unspoken connection. "Steady," Lyra said, her tail flicking sharply. Arik realized that despite the danger, she trusted him. The storm raged around them, but they worked in harmony. Lightning struck near the barrier, but their combined efforts held it together. The energy field stabilized, and slowly, the outer shield held firm. As the storm began to pass, Arik and Lyra stood side by side, panting and covered in dust and crystal shards. For the first time, Lyra's tail moved freely, curling gently, with a subtle sway. Arik stared, realization dawning. This was a sign of happiness. She was pleased with him. You did well," Lyra said, her voice softer than before. "You acted quickly and with care. I am impressed." Arik felt his chest tighten with relief and a strange warmth. "Thank you, Lyra," I couldn't have done it without you. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Her tail swayed gently. It was a simple gesture, but to Arik it spoke volumes. For the first time, he understood that Lyra was not cold or hostile. She was cautious, careful, but she appreciated his efforts. Over the next few days, the work continued. The storm had passed, but the barrier required further reinforcement. Arik and Lyra spent long hours together side by side, learning each other's habits and patterns. Communication improved, and with it, trust grew. Lyra began to relax around him, her tail moving more naturally. She would sometimes flick it playfully when he made a clever adjustment or a light-hearted comment. Arik responded in kind, learning to read her emotions through her gestures and movements. One evening, after a particularly long day, they stood on the platform overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected off the crystalline towers, casting shimmering light across the landscape. Arik noticed Lyra's tail gently swaying behind her, a soft rhythm that mirrored the calm night. You handled today well, Lyra said quietly. The barrier is stronger because of your efforts. Arik smiled, feeling a rare sense of accomplishment. I couldn't have done it without you, Lyra. You guided me. Her tail twitched lightly, a subtle upward curve. Arik felt his heart skip a beat. He was learning to read her signals, and this one meant something special. She was happy. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moons rise higher. For the first time, Arik felt a genuine connection, not just as colleagues, but as two beings learning to understand each other across the boundaries of species and culture. The next morning brought a new challenge. Reports indicated that the storm's energy had caused minor damage to parts of the city. Arik and Lyra were called to assess the situation. As they walked together, Arik felt a growing sense of camaraderie. They were no longer strangers. They were partners facing challenges together. Lyra glanced at him, her tail flicking lightly. Arik nodded in response, understanding the subtle cue. They would face this task as a team. At the damaged site, they worked with precision. Human tools combined with Zephyri energy techniques, and slowly, the repairs were made. Lyra's tail moved freely now, swaying gently as she guided Arik. It was a small but significant change. She was comfortable around him, and he could see it clearly. By the end of the day, the repairs were complete. Arik and Lyra stood together, surveying their work. The storm barrier was stronger than before, and the city was safe once more. Lyra's tail flicked upward in a clear, confident movement. Arik smiled. He finally understood. She was happy, not just with the success of the mission, but with him. For the first time since landing on Zefara Prime, Arik felt a deep sense of hope. They had faced danger together, learned to trust each other, and begun to form a bond that transcended words. As they returned to the council chambers to report their success, Arik glanced at Lyra. Her tail swayed gently, and she met his eyes, with a quiet acknowledgement. He knew that the journey ahead would still have challenges, but he was ready. Together, they could face anything. And in that moment, Arik realized something important. Sometimes understanding comes not from words, but from actions, gestures, and the smallest signs of emotion. Lyra's tail had told him more than any language could. The mornings on Zefara Prime were crisp and calm after the storm. The twin suns rose, spilling violet and gold across the crystalline towers of the city. Commander Arik Dane walked toward the barrier project site with a sense of purpose. Today was supposed to be routine, reinforce the energy conduits and ensure stability. But Arik had learned by now that routine rarely existed on this planet. Lyra was already there, standing near one of the outer units. Her tail was curled neatly, behind her, still and attentive. When she saw Arik, it flicked once sharply. He froze, unsure of the meaning. Was it impatience, annoyance, or simply alertness? Good morning, Lyra, Arik said, forcing a calm tone. Ready to begin? Lyra inclined her head slightly. Yes, Commander Dane. The conduits need recalibration after yesterday's storm. Precision is required. Arik nodded and moved to the nearest control panel. They had worked together long enough that their teamwork was smooth, but subtle misunderstandings still lingered. He had learned to watch her tail movements closely, But even now the signals were complex. The work was precise and demanding. Arik adjusted the settings on the human stabilizers, while Lyra channeled Zephyri energy to synchronize the conduits. The barrier hummed with power, reflecting the combined effort of human ingenuity and Zephyri knowledge. Suddenly, a conduit shifted unexpectedly, and sparks flew. Arik lunged forward instinctively to steady it. Lyra reached out as well, her hands brushing against his briefly. Her tail flicked sharply, curling upward and then twitching rapidly. Arik froze, startled. He had learned some of her signals, but this one was new, confusing. Was she angry? Was he doing something wrong? Lyra, are you upset? He asked cautiously. She stepped back slightly, tilting her head. Her eyes, large and luminous, studied him carefully. Her tail remained stiff and flicking in quick movements. Arik swallowed nervously. This was not the friendly swaying motion he had seen during the storm. He had misread it before. I thought you were pleased yesterday, he said. But now, I am not sure. Lyra's gaze softened, but her tail continued to twitch. Arik felt a pang of worry. Perhaps he had done something to offend her. He tried to speak gently. Please tell me if I have made a mistake, he said. I do not want to upset you. Lyra stepped closer, and Arik noticed the subtle shift in her tail, curves mixed with flicks, like a complicated dance. She spoke, carefully, choosing each word. Commander Dane, your actions are unpredictable, she said. You move with speed, sometimes without consideration. It startles me. Arik's heart sank. He had never intended to be careless. I only want to help, he said. I thought we were working well together. Lyra's tail twitched sharply again, but this time it seemed less rigid. She continued. You misunderstand the patterns of our work. Zephyri energy requires attention to subtle timing. Your methods are direct. Effective, yes, but startling. Arik nodded, taking in her words. He realized that what he had thought was anger might have been caution or surprise. He had misread her signals entirely. I understand, he said softly. I will be more careful. Please, guide me. For a moment, there was silence. The wind whispered through the crystalline towers, carrying faint echoes of the storm from the previous day. Then, slowly, Lyra's tail swayed gently, a small curve at the tip. It was subtle, almost hesitant, but Arik recognized it as a sign of acknowledgement, a step toward trust again. They returned to work, this time moving even more carefully, communicating in a mix of gestures and simple words. Arik followed Lyra's instructions closely, adjusting his actions to match the subtle patterns of Zephyri energy flow. Hours passed, and the routine became almost meditative. The barrier hummed steadily, each conduit vibrating with balanced energy. Arik began to feel more comfortable, learning to anticipate her movements and intentions. During a brief pause, Lyra walked to the edge of the platform and looked out over the city. Her tail swayed softly, relaxed for the first time that morning. Arik joined her quietly, not speaking, simply observing. You adapt quickly, Lyra said finally, her voice softer than before. It is unusual for humans to adjust to Zephyri patterns so fast. Arik smiled, feeling warmth spread through his chest. I have a good teacher, he replied. Her tail flicked lightly, a small, subtle upward curve. Arik's heart leapt. This was a sign of approval. She was happy. Not in anger, not in caution, but in a simple, quiet satisfaction. Before they could continue, an alert blared across the platform. A minor energy fluctuation had been detected in a distant part of the barrier. Arik and Lyra exchanged a quick glance. This was not dangerous, but it required immediate attention. As they ran toward the site, Arik stumbled on a loose panel. Lyra reached out instinctively, catching his arm. In the sudden movement, their hands touched briefly and her tail flicked sharply again. Arik froze, unsure. Was she warning him, or reacting to the contact? He had misread her before. He didn't want to misread this again. Lyra, he began, but she held up a hand. Commander Dane, she said, her voice calm but firm. Do not assume my tail's movements are what you think. They are not always emotion in the way you understand. They are signals. Caution, attention, readiness. You must observe closely. Arik nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed. He had assumed too much before, letting hope color his interpretation. I understand, he said quietly. They reached the affected area and quickly assessed the fluctuation. It was minor, nothing that would compromise the barrier. Lyra instructed Arik precisely, and together they corrected the imbalance. As they worked, Arik watched her tail closely, noting every curve and flick. Slowly, he began to notice patterns. A gentle sway meant contentment, a sharp flick meant alertness, and a slight curl indicated acknowledgement or approval. It was subtle, but he was learning. By the time the work was complete, the sun was low in the sky. The city shimmered in the fading light, casting reflections across the crystalline towers. Arik and Lyra stood on the platform, surveying the restored barrier. Lyra's tail swayed gently, relaxed and fluid. Arik felt a rush of relief. She was not angry, she was pleased. He had misread her signals before, but now he understood. You did well today, she said softly. Despite the missteps, you adapted. You learn. Arik smiled, feeling pride and warmth. Thank you, Lyra. I could not have done it without you guiding me. Her tail flicked upward once, a clear gesture of approval. Arik's chest swelled. This was a small, simple movement, but it meant more than words ever could. She trusted him, and she was happy with his efforts. For the first time, Arik felt a deeper connection with Lyra, not just as colleagues or allies, but as beings learning to understand each other across worlds. He realized that trust and friendship required patience, observation, and a willingness to adapt. As night fell, they walked back to the council chambers together. The twin moons reflected off the crystalline towers, casting soft, shimmering light. Arik glanced at Lyra. Her tail moved freely, swaying gently behind her. He realized that he was beginning to understand not only her signals, but her emotions. And, somewhere deep inside, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the start of something more than cooperation. Perhaps this was the beginning of a true connection, a bond built on trust, understanding, and the smallest signs of happiness. The sky above Zephyra Prime darkened suddenly, faster than anyone had predicted. Commander Arik Dane felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as a low rumble vibrated through the ground. The twin suns were obscured by dense, swirling clouds, tinged with violet and green. Energy readings flashed warnings across the portable scanner Arik carried. Lyra, he called, scanning the horizon. Something is approaching the city, fast and strong. Lyra appeared beside him in a blink, her eyes wide with alertness. Her tail flicked sharply, the movements quick and tense. Arik had learned to read her signs. She was not angry, but extremely alert and concerned. Commander Dane, this is not a storm, she said, her voice calm but firm. Sensors indicate an external threat, biological, large, moving quickly, toward the colony. Arik's heart sank. A predator? A creature of unknown origin? They had dealt with storms, but this was different, alive, intelligent perhaps, and dangerous. They ran toward the barrier control station, dodging loose crystal, debris. Lyra's tail flicked sharply with every step, guiding them around hazards. Arik moved in rhythm with her, finally understanding the subtle cues that warned him of danger. When they reached the station, Lyra pointed toward the approaching creature on the scanner. Its massive form glided over the landscape, moving with purpose. It was enormous, with a glimmering exoskeleton, 4 limbs ending in sharp claws and glowing eyes that reflected the twin suns. We must act fast, Lyra said. The barrier alone cannot hold it. We need to coordinate a defensive plan, human tactics and Zephyri energy combined. Arik nodded, adrenaline surging. Let's do it. They quickly organized a team of human engineers and Zephyri operatives. Arik handled the deployment of stabilizers and energy emitters, while Lyra coordinated the positioning of Zephyri conduits, using her tail to signal the team. Every flick and sway communicated instructions with precision. The creature approached, the outer barrier, massive claws slashing through the air. Lightning from residual storms crackled across its exoskeleton. The barrier's energy fields flared as it absorbed the impact, and Arik realized that timing and coordination were critical. "Now!" Lyra shouted, her tail curling upward, signaling the exact moment to release a pulse of Zephyri energy into the barrier. Arik synchronized the human stabilizers, sending a controlled surge into the field. Sparks danced across the conduits and the barrier pulsed with energy. The creature recoiled, momentarily stunned. Arik glanced at Lyra. Her tail was moving freely, flicking with confidence and a subtle rhythm of satisfaction. He realized that this was more than alertness, it was trust. She trusted him to act at the right moment. "Keep steady," she said, guiding the team. "Do not falter." For the next several minutes, they worked in perfect harmony. Arik anticipated her cues, moving stabilizers and channels exactly when she indicated. Her tail swayed, curled, and flicked with subtle complexity, signaling adjustments, warnings, and encouragement. The creature tried to force its way through the barrier again, but the combined human Zephyri efforts held. Arik leaped to adjust, a faltering unit, and Lyra joined him, stabilizing it with her conduit. Their hands touched briefly again, but this time Arik felt no hesitation, no confusion, only a mutual understanding. "Commander Dane," Lyra said, her tail curling softly, "you are adapting well. I trust your actions." Arik felt a warmth in his chest he could not ignore. The words, combined with her tail movements, conveyed more than praise. They conveyed respect, trust, and something deeper. Lightning struck the platform near them, and sparks scattered, but Arik and Lyra continued undeterred. They were a team now, each movement and gesture perfectly synchronized. The creature, realizing the barrier was unyielding, roared and retreated momentarily, circling the city. Arik took a deep breath, adjusting a stabilizer. "Lyra, I think we can hold it," he said. Her tail swayed gently, a subtle curve at the tip. He smiled. That motion, it was not just trust. It was relief, satisfaction, and perhaps happiness. She was pleased with him, not just for the success of the defense, but for the way he had worked with her, understood her, and acted decisively. The creature surged forward again, faster this time, testing the barrier's limits. Arik and Lyra coordinated the defense seamlessly. Arik moved quickly, relying on the cues from her tail, while she directed energy with precise timing. Every flick, curl, and sway conveyed meaning he had once thought impossible to understand. Finally, the creature, frustrated and defeated, retreated, beyond the outer limits of the colony. The threat was neutralized and the barrier remained intact. Human engineers cheered, Zephyri operatives relaxed, and Arik and Lyra stood together, breathing heavily but triumphant. Lyra's tail swayed freely, now gentle and fluid. Arik realized what it meant: complete trust and happiness. She was happy, not in playfulness, not in fleeting approval, but in a deep, genuine sense of satisfaction. She was pleased with him and with their teamwork. You handled this well," Lyra said softly, her voice carrying an edge of warmth, of your timing, your decisions, your courage. "I am impressed." Arik felt his chest tighten with pride and a strange joy. "Thank you, Lyra. I couldn't have done it without you guiding me. I understand now. Your tail, it tells me more than words ever could." Her tail flicked upward once, a clear gesture of happiness. Arik smiled, feeling a sense of connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. They were no longer just allies. They were a team, synchronized in thought, action, and understanding. In the quiet after the battle, Arik and Lyra walked along the platform, surveying the city. The twin moons reflected off the crystalline towers, and the air was filled with the soft hum of energy flowing through the barrier. "Commander Dane," Lyra said after a pause, "I appreciate your efforts today. You have learned more than I expected. Humans rarely adapt so quickly." Arik laughed softly. "And I've had a great teacher." Her tail swayed lightly, a gentle motion of warmth and acknowledgement. Arik felt a spark in his heart. He realized that he had misjudged her before. He had thought she was distant, maybe even cold, but now he understood. Her tail had been her language, and he had finally learned to read it. "You've changed my perspective," Lyra continued. "I thought humans relied only on words, but actions. They speak volumes. You acted with care, courage, and thought. That is important. Arik's heart raced. Lyra, I'm glad you trust me. And I trust you too. I think we understand each other more than either of us expected. Her tail flicked softly, brushing against the ground in a subtle, graceful curve. It was a gesture of quiet joy. Arik smiled, realizing that this was her way of showing happiness. She was not just relieved by the defense's success. She was genuinely happy with him. For the first time, Arik felt a connection that went beyond words, beyond duty or mission. It was trust, understanding, and something deeper, a bond built in the heat of danger and forged through teamwork. As they returned to the council chambers to report the event, Arik noticed something extraordinary. The Zephyri operatives around them moved with subtle admiration, their tails swaying in patterns he could not yet fully understand. But he did not need to. His focus was on Lyra, whose tail now moved freely, relaxed, and expressive. He had learned to read it, and in its movements he saw her happiness, her trust, and the beginning of a bond neither had expected. The council received their report with nods of approval. Humans and Zephyri alike were impressed by the combined effort. Arik watched Lyra, noticing her tail flick in a playful, light movement, a subtle signal of satisfaction. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment and connection. As night fell, Arik and Lyra walked side by side along the city's crystalline streets. The twin moons shone above, and the city's towers sparkled with energy. Lyra's tail swayed gently, in rhythm with her steps, and Arik matched his pace. "You were right about patience and observation," he said softly. "Understanding you. It's been a lesson, and I'm grateful for it." Lyra glanced at him, her tail curling upward lightly. "And I am grateful for your efforts, Commander Dane. You have proven yourself." Arik felt a warmth that went beyond professional pride. This was personal. Their partnership had grown into trust, and trust had blossomed into something more. Something unspoken, but deeply felt. For the first time since arriving on Zephyra Prime, Arik allowed himself to feel hope, not just for the mission, but for a future with Lyra by his side, where understanding, trust, and happiness could grow together. In that moment, he realized a profound truth. Courage, care, and attention could bridge the gap between species, between worlds, and between hearts. And Lyra's tail, her tail had told him all he needed to know. The morning air on Zephyra Prime was cool and clear. The twin suns rose over the crystalline city, casting long shadows that shimmered across the towers. Commander Arik Dane walked through the streets with a quiet sense of purpose. The city was alive yet calm after the recent storms and the unexpected predator attack. The barrier was stronger than ever, the colony safe, and for the first time Arik felt a sense of peace here. Lyra awaited him at the storm barrier site. Her tail swayed gently behind her, relaxed and expressive. When she saw him, the tail flicked, upward in a small, welcoming curve. Arik smiled. He had come to understand these subtle movements as more than signals. They were expressions of emotion, trust, and now friendship. "Commander Dane," Lyra said, her voice soft yet firm. "The barrier holds. The city is safe. And I must commend you once more for your actions during the threat." Arik inclined his head respectfully. "Thank you, Lyra, but I could not have done it without your guidance. Your knowledge, your patience, it made all the difference." Her tail swayed gently, a motion of satisfaction. It was her way of showing appreciation, of showing that she valued him, not just for his skills, but for his dedication and understanding. The day was filled with routine maintenance, a welcome reprieve after the recent crises. Arik and Lyra moved from one unit to another, checking conduits, adjusting energy flows, and reinforcing the outer barriers. Their teamwork was smooth, almost instinctive. Arik no longer needed to think about every flick of her tail. He simply knew, as if their minds had begun to synchronize. During a brief break, they stood at the edge of the barrier platform, overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected off the towers, casting soft, shimmering light. The city was alive with activity. Zephyri operatives working alongside human engineers, each respecting the other's strengths and skills. Lyra's tail swayed in a gentle, rhythmic motion, and Arik noticed a change. There was no stiffness, no caution, only calm, deliberate happiness. She had learned to trust him fully, and he, in turn, had learned to understand her. "You have changed my perception of humans," Lyra said quietly. "I once believed that humans acted only for themselves, but you act with care, with thought, with courage. It is remarkable." Arik felt warmth spread through his chest. "And you have taught me patience, observation, and respect. I've learned more from you than I could have imagined." Her tail flicked upward lightly, a gesture of subtle joy. Arik smiled, realizing that this was her way of expressing happiness and approval. She was pleased with him, not just for their success in the barrier or the defense, but for who he was, and for the partnership they had built together. As the day progressed, Arik and Lyra continued their inspections, moving through the outer city and the barrier network. They worked seamlessly, each movement complementing the other. The Zephyri and human teams around them began to notice their coordination, how naturally they adapted to each other, anticipating actions without words. During one moment of rest, Arik adjusted a conduit while Lyra monitored energy readings. Their hands touched briefly and her tail flicked sharply, then curved gently. He realized that this motion was not alarm or warning. It was acknowledgement, almost playful, a sign of genuine comfort with his presence. "You have adapted remarkably, Commander Dane," Lyra said, her eyes reflecting the light of the twin suns. "I trust you completely." Arik's heart raced. He had felt her trust growing over the days, but hearing it in words, combined with her tail movements, made it real. "Lyra, I trust you as well, and I feel connected to you in ways I didn't expect when I first arrived." Her tail swayed gently, a movement of happiness and calm. Arik smiled, understanding fully for the first time. Lyra was not just a colleague or a leader of her people. She was a friend, a partner, and someone who had come to value him as much as he valued her. The twin suns reached their zenith, and Arik suggested a break. They walked along a path that wound through the crystalline city, observing Zephyri children playing and human engineers interacting with local flora. The scene was peaceful, almost serene, a stark contrast to the storms and threats they had faced together. Lyra's tail moved in a relaxed sway, brushing softly against the ground. Arik felt an urge to speak, to share his thoughts. "Lyra, I never imagined I could feel this way on another world. But being here, working with you, understanding you, it's changed me." She glanced at him, her eyes calm and luminous. Her tail curled upward slightly, a delicate, confident motion. It was her way of expressing acknowledgement and happiness simultaneously. "And you have changed my perspective, Commander Dane. I have learned to trust, to observe, and to appreciate more fully. You are remarkable." Arik felt a warmth he could not describe. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of their connection. It was more than duty, more than respect. It was trust, friendship, and a quiet happiness shared through understanding. Later, as the twin moons rose high above the city, Arik and Lyra returned to the barrier platform. The night was calm, the energy fields humming gently in the darkness. They stood side by side, observing the city they had helped protect. "You know," Arik said softly, "I thought when I arrived here that I might never understand your ways, but I was wrong. Your tale, it tells a story, and I've learned to read it. And in doing so, I've learned about you, about trust, and about happiness." Lyra's tail swayed gently, a soft and deliberate motion. "And I have learned that humans can act with thought, courage, and care. You have proven yourself, Commander Dane, not just in skill but in heart." For a long moment they stood in silence, the hum of the barrier and the glow of the moons filling the space between them. Arik reached out, and their hands brushed. Her tail flicked upward, curling gently around itself, a clear gesture of trust, acknowledgement, and joy. I realize now, Arik said softly, that understanding doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from actions, gestures, and the smallest signs of emotion, like your tail. Lyra's tail swayed with a gentle rhythm, brushing softly against the crystalline platform. Yes, she said quietly. Sometimes the heart speaks in ways that words cannot capture. And today I am happy. Not just because the city is safe, but because of you. Arik felt his chest tighten with a mix of joy and relief. I'm happy too, Lyra. Happy that we understand each other and that we can face challenges together. As the night deepened, the city glimmered like a sea of stars. Arik and Lyra remained on the platform side by side, observing the calm after the storms, both natural and otherwise. Their bond, forged in danger, strengthened through trust, and deepened by understanding, had become something rare and extraordinary. Finally, Arik spoke again. Lyra, I think this is only the beginning. There are challenges ahead, but I believe we can face them. Together. Not just as allies, but as partners. Friends. Perhaps more than friends, in ways words cannot yet describe. Her tail flicked in a gentle upward motion, curling softly. It was a subtle, beautiful gesture that spoke of happiness, trust, and acceptance. Arik smiled, understanding completely. Yes, she said softly. Together. And I am happy. Truly happy. The twin moons cast their light across the platform, shimmering on the barrier and the crystalline city below. In that moment, Arik realized something profound. Connection, trust, and happiness could transcend species, language, and culture. They had built something that neither had expected, but both cherished deeply. Arik glanced at Lyra one last time that night. Her tail swayed gently, a perfect reflection of her calm and joy. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with trust, understanding, and hearts aligned. And in that quiet, serene moment, Commander Arik Dane understood the truth. Sometimes happiness comes not from words, not from grand gestures, but from understanding, patience, and the smallest signs of care. A flick of a tail, a gentle gesture, and a shared moment of trust could speak more than any language ever could. For Arik and Lyra, the story of two worlds meeting had become a story of hearts connecting, a bond that would endure, and a happiness that was visible in the simplest, most beautiful way, in the movement of a tail.